Welcome to the Alderley Park Discovery Podcast, produced in partnership with the online pharmaceutical news and analysis destination pharmaphorum. The podcast presents perspectives on UK and global bioscience innovation trends, with input from experts located within Alderley Park in the northwest of England. The Life Science Campus offers exceptional bioscience facilities for R&D-focused life science companies at every stage of their life cycle, from startup to global corporate. I'm Dominic Tyre, Creative and Editorial Director at pharmaphorum. So Kath, welcome to the podcast. I'd like to start by asking you just to say a few words about yourself and also to introduce Alderley Park to the listeners.
Thank you very much. My name's Kath Mackay and I'm Managing Director of Alderley Park in Cheshire. Alderley Park is the UK's largest life science campus and is home to over 200 organisations, each of those working on healthcare challenges through different technologies or tools or development of new medicines. In those organisations, we have 3 research institutes. We have the Medicines Discovery Catapult, the Antimicrobial Resistance Centre, and Cancer Research UK Manchester Institute. So it really is a vibrant scientific community that we have on site. And we support those companies to grow and scale with access to scientific facilities, science services and support. And we run an award-winning accelerator programme with BioCity, which offers funding support, boot camps and access to an expert mentor network. Alderley Park is part of Bruntwood SciTech's network of innovation districts, and Bruntwood SciTech was formed in 2018 and is a joint venture between Bruntwood, the property company, and Legal & General. SciTech is the UK's largest dedicated property provider to science and technology businesses, and it's a very interesting organisation to be part of, given the focus on life science and technology organisations currently in response to the health and care challenge of COVID-19. And I joined Alderley Park last year, and prior to this, I worked at Innovate UK, the government's innovation agency, where I led the life science team. And I've got a broad background in commercial development, working in both the private and public sector, and I'm also a former scientist.
Okay, great. So there's obviously an awful lot going on at Alderley Park, perhaps now more than ever before. But in this episode of the podcast, we're looking at the Lighthouse Lab COVID-19 testing programme. So can you tell us a bit about the Lighthouse Lab network to get us started?
Absolutely. So the Lighthouse Lab network is a network of national diagnostic labs, which has been created recently by UK Government and Department of Health and Social Care. And it's supported by the wider scientific community to support the fight against COVID-19. But the Mega Lab at Alderley Park forms part of that network, and it's the largest and biggest kind of public diagnostics effort in British history.
And how does the Alderley Park Lighthouse Lab fit into the UK's national plan for tackling COVID-19?
So the Lighthouse Labs generally across that network were established in a matter of weeks to increase the number of coronavirus tests that could take place each day to support the national effort against the coronavirus pandemic. So the Lighthouse Labs and the Alderley Park Lab are parts of the government's 5-pillar plan to rapidly scale up coronavirus testing across the UK and actively contributing to the achievement of the government's testing target.
And just looking at Alderley Park's place within this network, why was Alderley Park chosen, do you think, as one of the first sites for a Lighthouse Lab?
So Alderley Park's got a strong reputation in life sciences as a campus for science and innovation. It was selected to be one of 3 Lighthouse Labs because of its world-leading infrastructure, and also because it was part of Bruntwood SciTech's wider network of expertise. Bruntwood SciTech led the design and delivery of the facility, so it was recognised the expertise in property and laboratory development, and it pulled upon wider expertise from the group in areas such as project management, construction operations, science knowledge, waste, logistics, and health and safety support and advice.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Alderley Park hasn't just been selected for one of the sites for a Lighthouse Lab, but indeed it's up and running already. Can you tell us when the lab went live and how it's been performing since then?
No, absolutely. So the lab went live in April, and it's up and running, and it was around 3 weeks from, I suppose, an early scoping call I had with the chief exec of the Medicines Discovery Catapult, who run that network. We had a chat to talk about whether this could be done at Alderley Park. And from that chat to the arrival and testing of the first patient samples was around 3 weeks. So it got up and running incredibly quickly, and is now on a daily basis continuing to increase the daily testing figures and hit those government targets.
And it must have been a huge effort to begin that work and undertake it at such speed. I presume it's not something you were able to do it entirely in working in isolation. Can you tell us a bit about how you've worked with the NHS and perhaps the wider scientific community on the lab?
So the Lighthouse Lab at Alderley Park and the wider network of labs is managed by an organisation called Medicines Discovery Catapult, and they're a UK research and innovation funded technology and innovation centre based at Alderley Park. They haven't done it alone, and they've pulled together a cross-organisation team, which we're part of, and there are lots of different organisations working closely together to tackle this problem and get the facilities up and running so quickly. So the MDC, as we'll call them, has been required to commission equipment, train laboratory scientists to run the facility, and work closely with the NHS, Public Health England, and academic groups such as the University of Manchester to validate experiments, review data, and align it with NHS data. And like I said, within 3 weeks, they were screening the first patient samples at Alderley Park. Another part of that team is AstraZeneca, who've been working closely with the Catapult on the development of high-throughput assays. Academia and NHS were also involved, providing governance, knowledge of how the virus operates, auditing of the facility by the NHS, for example. And the lab itself is run by teams of volunteers that have come from wider academic groups across the north of the UK. So the people in those facilities currently come from organisations such as Cancer Research UK, University of Manchester, Manchester Metropolitan University, University of Salford, Liverpool, Keele, York. There are many, many others which I haven't mentioned. There is a contribution from SMEs, so there are a number of companies on site and off site who are contributing to the Lighthouse Labs by lending their expertise and capabilities. And I suppose wider in the public sector, there are other organisations who aren't life science organisations, but design and build and laboratory organisations which have provided lab and scientific expertise and health and safety expertise.
So clearly it's bringing together quite a range of partners on this endeavour. How important is that spirit of collaboration for something of this magnitude?
Collaboration has been incredibly important. So it's not been delivered by one organisation working alone. So we, in terms of getting those labs up and running, we work really closely with the Catapult, with our vendors, with AstraZeneca to get things up and running. With Medicines Discovery Catapult leading the facility and playing a larger coordination role. And this couldn't happen without organisations putting their commercial differences and drivers to one side and gathering together around a shared challenge. Another part of that challenge is the instrumentation and the equipment side of things, where the PCR assay is run on equipment which was donated by academic and university institutions across the country. So across the network, I think there were something in the region of 7,500 PCR readers. Some of those have arrived at Alderley Park in black cabs, buses, army vans. They've turned up in every form of transport possible. So it's just interesting, actually, in terms of that wider collaboration, how many different types of organisations have been involved, including on the logistics side, the army.
And so the Alderley Park Lighthouse Lab is, as you mentioned, one of 3 in the country, and it's described in this lovely phrase as a mega lab. But can you give us an idea about what scale of operations that involves at Alderley Park?
Absolutely, yeah, and it has been described as a mega lab or a super lab, depending on what you want to call it. I think that reflects, the amount of testing going on rather than the size of the facility, but it is quite a large facility nonetheless. And
we can look at how the Lighthouse Lab works in practice. How does it fit in with elements such as the drive-through testing sites, for example, that we've been hearing have been set up and are operational?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's part of that wider network of testing centres and collection centres that we've heard about on the news or through the scientific press. So COVID-19 swab samples are basically sent to Alderley Park and the Lighthouse laboratory there across the country for analysis. So that there's no swabbing that takes place at Alderley Park. It happens off-site. The off-site collection centres across the North and the Midlands. And those are the drive-through kind of test centres in airports and car parks that you may have heard about.
So if we look at the operation of the Lighthouse lab, what sort of workforce challenges have you had to perhaps overcome in order to test this huge number of samples each day?
So the Medicines Discovery Catapult is the group actually kind of testing the samples, and I think they've had to pull together that group of volunteers to run the laboratory from the various business and academic groups across the North and beyond. I think the challenges that we've had across Bruntwood with SciTech, it's been to really deliver a facility of that nature in such a short amount of time. So we had to move at pace to create a site that I think normally would take us around 4 to 6 months to complete a facility of that nature. And we did it and had the first samples coming in under 3 weeks. So I mean, we just had to find a way to work more efficiently in terms of pulling upon the expertise of the team to think about how we could get a facility delivered at the required quality in a very speedy manner, because we obviously couldn't wait 4 to 6 months to do that with COVID-19. We'd still be doing it now. So we had a lot of kind of challenges to overcome in terms of how we could deliver such an ambitious project so quickly. But we had the skills and expertise and drive and determination to do that.
And it really does sound like everything is moving at such a quick pace at the moment. Can you maybe go into a little bit more detail around how not just how quickly it's all come together, but I suppose put it into context for listeners. How long would a project of this scale normally take to become operational?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it would take around 6 months, I'd say, to complete a project of this nature. And we were open in under 3 weeks and complete in around 5 weeks. So it really was delivered at unprecedented pace. And I think we just had to think about the ways we work as a team to think about how we can get that delivered against such a ambitious time frame. So within days of getting the call from the catapults, we were working, I think, on the planning, on the design. It involved close cooperation and communication between partners and a pattern of regular meetings and decision points. Within those days, we already had kind of 50-metre cranes moving large pieces of equipment around on site. And it really was extraordinary in terms of how we were put together. I think what was absolutely critical is the prioritisation of this project and the fact that everyone in the team knew what they were working towards and knew they were personally contributing to the national effort. So there was no kind of lack of motivation really in the team. Everyone really, really wanted to crack on and get this done and get it done as soon as possible. And our team was really required to design and deliver the facilities in a completely new way. And I think that really pulled upon the project management expertise, construction and operations expertise of the group, and the lab design and implementation side of the group to get that done. And it really was in response to the vital national need, which was well recognised by every single person working on the project.
And you've talked a bit about the combination of partners and different stakeholders that were required or that have come together to allow this project to come to fruition. But if we look at what that means on a workforce level, what sort of combination of maybe of experts or mix of skills have been required to bring this project off?
So the Medicines Discovery Catapult has been required to pull together a really highly skilled specialist workforce to carry out the testing. Luckily, that was in abundance in the north of the UK, with so much talent in those institutions and university groups that I've mentioned. But they've really been on the lookout for laboratory scientists who have experienced PCRSA, who've come to Alderley Park and work in that facility. There's now around 80 people in the Alderley Park laboratory and wider logistics team, and it couldn't have really taken place without the wider team of volunteers that came forward. Really, they've looked for scientists who are comfortable and competent in a Class 2 environment, and those who are comfortable and competent with molecular biology, as well as the Medicines Discovery Passport effort. There's been a wider kind of national support from organisations such as the Bioindustry Association and BioNow, who've been working, to spread the word about this and other COVID-19 related projects in terms of seeking volunteer support and equipment to go into these and other laboratories. So it's been a real mix of skills across the life science community.
And looking beyond the life science community, I mean, you mentioned earlier the Army's participation. Have you found yourself working with any other non-healthcare bodies or organisations on the lab?
Yeah, it's been fascinating actually, because obviously, I'm a scientist myself, so I always think about what's taking place in the labs and what are the assays and what's the science. But it's really been a cross-sector approach to delivering this. So yeah, we spoke about the Army, and the Army have been very supportive in terms of getting that facility up and running, in terms of logistics, and we need to work with other organisations now for a more permanent solution. So we're working with organisations such as Sodexo, who we already work with on site, who are experts in logistics. We have a very established supply chain of construction experts and organisations. So we've obviously pulled on them a lot to get the facility running. So it's been a real kind of construction effort too. We've also worked with, security consultants. So we're just thinking about kind of the facility might be in the spotlight, so we have to think about things like site security. Mm-hmm. So it's been a real mixed bag of people we've worked with. But we were fortunate as a life science campus and as an organisation which has put a lot of investment into the campus, that we have a strong network of construction and laboratory experts that we've been able to call upon.
Mm-hmm. And looking at how the Lighthouse Lab has come together, how does that fit? How does that compare with the breadth of services that Alderley Park would usually provide in normal circumstances?
Yeah, it's a very interesting fit. So I said previously we've got around 200 companies on site, and there's a real breadth and kind of flavour to those companies that we have. So we've got organisations working in drug discovery, infection, diagnostics, digital, data and AI. And I think that the Lighthouse Lab really is very complementary to the expertise that we have on site in infectious diseases and lab-based diagnostics. So it's a very good fit, and I think that's why there's been a large pool of volunteers to call on to run that facility, because of the organisations that we currently have on site.
Mm-hmm. And going through the process of working on one of the UK's first Lighthouse labs, have you learnt anything new about Alderley Park or its staff and clients?
I've learned that I think my own colleagues and the customers and clients that we have on site can be incredibly flexible, and I think they've shown great flexibility in terms of delivering this programme and rising to the challenge. I think it hasn't surprised me. I think it's just reinforced a belief that I have across the campus, is that they really are a very collaborative lot, and in times of great need, the scientific community that we have across Alderley Park and the wider Northwest will come together at the drop of a hat around a shared scientific challenge. And that's been absolutely beautiful to watch, really. Everyone coming together across my organisation and across the various organisations that are working with the Catapult on this. Everyone just wants to come together to deliver the testing programme. Companies have set aside their own priorities, their own commercial drivers and targets, and they've just thought about that bigger picture and containing the virus. And I think that thread has run through everything that's taken place over the site in the last few weeks, and all the people working on the project.
And such an important mission, really, for the whole scientific community at the moment. So, drawing back from what you've learned around Alderley Park, can you tell me a little bit about what lessons in terms of innovation we can perhaps draw from the creation of the Lighthouse Lab at what's clearly a time of international crisis?
Sure, I suppose innovation has many phases. There's the creation of new ideas and things, but there's also the kind of deployment and the scale of innovation. I think what the Lighthouse Lab has been a great example of is how you can take an existing innovation and bring together experts and deploy that at scale incredibly quickly. So I think that's a good example and a good lesson of how we can deploy an innovation and a technology at scale. I think there are other lessons in innovation across the COVID-19 story which we can think about too. And I think there's pulling together expertise across the clinical trial network to deploy new and extensive COVID-19 treatments across the NHS system. And I think what's happened in some of those trials is very exciting, and certainly we have probably the most activity in the UK when you compare the rest of Europe. I think some of the innovations in vaccines development have been very encouraging, especially the work coming out of the groups in Oxford. So I think there's certainly a lot we can think about in terms of the creation of new treatments and certainly the rollout of new diagnostic tools and approaches.
Okay, and Kath, I'd like to wind up this episode of the podcast by hearing your thoughts on the future of the lab. Can you tell me what's next for the Lighthouse Lab at Alderley Park?
So I think we've built something quickly to address the COVID-19 short-term challenge, and actually that's obviously going to continue. But I think what we've got the opportunity is for a strong diagnostics legacy for the UK. And there's a commitment by Matt Hancock in his 5-pillar plan to kind of grow and cement a diagnostics industry in the UK. And it'd be great if we could play a part in that kind of long-term vision. And we're really proud to be part of that industry.
Great. Well, Kath, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Alderley Park Discovery Podcast. For all episodes and more information, visit alderleypark.co.uk/listen. Please leave us a rating and a review and subscribe within your podcast app so you know when new episodes are released. Thank you.